Hi, I'm Dave. Today, Dave Takes It On has a look at the COP28 climate conference being held in the United Arab Emirates, running from now to the middle of December. Strange location, United Arab Emirates, 8th largest oil producer in the world. It's an elective monarchy. Long ties back to the British. 1922, we tried to secure exclusive oil rights there. So it is a major oil producer, and it's not the best place, surely, to have a look at climate change. Is this a joke, or is it reality? Well, one record already broken is the number of delegates from the oil industry. It's over 2,400 delegates there. One assumes purely to protect their own interests. It is the biggest single group turning up there. Well, climate change. Strange subject. The ice lovers deny it, absolutely deny it. EV lovers worry about it. Now, I have to say here, I am not a scientist, but I do have a lot of common sense. And my question is, if every single year, year after year, the planet breaks temperature records, would anyone out there, ice lovers or EV lovers, like to guess what next year is likely to bring? Now, the climate is changing. Whether it's our fault or not, that's open to debate, but there is a worry that climate change could be a major impact in the future. Now, there are loads of people, total deniers, but you have to say, all of the experts are now agreed. And you've got to look at these EV deniers and say, are they in one of the 5 stages of grief? Well, it starts with denial. They're definitely denying anything to do with the oil industry or their cars is to do with climate change. Anger, massive amount of anger. Bargaining. Yeah, well, when China does something, we'll do something until... Yeah, depression, well, what can we do? There's not. And finally, acceptance. Okay. So, where are we? Well, let's just get realistic. NASA, the Royal Society, the International Energy Agency, NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, the Met Office, and pretty much everyone, scientist in the world, says, yeah, it's happening and it's man-made. Now, it's sad to say that we're very reluctant to change. You see, the oil giants still have massive investments and are making massive profits. They are never going to give them up until they have to. And there is no sign of that happening in the future. Well, I don't know what's going to happen for the future. So, the few deniers out there are up against the absolute vast majority of all the world's scientists. But I think we're heading towards a tipping point. And no, not a climate one, but a financial one. You see, at the moment it is now cheaper to make electricity from PV, photovoltaic, than from gas. It's now cheaper to store it in batteries than make it from PV or gas. We're reaching a tipping point where just pure finances is going to put the oil companies out of business and the renewable energy in business. Now, if we add into that rising sea levels, they are, maybe slowly, and they're going to start costing us more in coastal erosion than the profits that the oil giants are making. So are we heading towards a tipping point that's likely to stop oil and force us to look after our planet better? You see, a lot of people say EVs aren't the answer. No, I absolutely agree with you. EVs are not the answer. PV is not the answer. Batteries are not the answer. But they are all part of the answer that will be thrust on us very soon. For a long time, China was one of the major polluters in the whole of the world, building coal-fired power stations and opening up coal mines like they were going out of fashion. It turns out today that image is very wrong. China today has more renewable energy than anyone else anywhere in the world. Now, yes, they still have coal-fired power stations, but where they are building renewable energy, they are shutting down coal-fired power stations. And where renewable energy can take over, renewable energy is taking over. China is an absolute giant of renewable energy compared to the USA. Obviously, they're an oil state. But around the world, people are now starting to realise, forget the climate for the moment, just have a look at the finances. And if you look at Australia, massive investment into battery grid-connected systems, the megapacks. It's been worked out that if you produce too much energy during the day from photovoltaic cells, just store it. It's cheaper to store it than produce it. So you store it for the time when you don't have excess electricity, i.e. at night. And in Australia, the coal-fired power stations are shutting down at an absolutely rapidly accelerating pace. These were called peaker plants. And in Australia, they were held aside specifically for peak production. So that there are times when everyone gets home, switches on television, air conditioning, cooking, lighting, everything all at once, that these systems couldn't cope. The power demand was simply too high. So they had special power stations, coal-fired ones, that did nothing else other than sat there ticking over, burning coal, waiting in the background until a peak power period was approaching. Then they would shovel in coal like it was going out of fashion for a couple of hours, produce masses of electricity, and then stop shoveling. And overnight and the next day, those power plants would not be used. They'd still be burning coal, they'd still be putting pollution into the atmosphere, but not doing anything. Well, the grid-connected battery packs are now taking over. They do store electricity during the day, when the sun is at its height and the PV production is at its highest, and they let that out at peak times. And the beauty of the grid-connected battery systems is it is instantaneous. While the coal-fired power stations have to shovel in coal to try and get the head of steam up to drive the generators to produce the electricity, a battery, as we all know, gives instant electricity. You turn your torch on, doesn't take 5 minutes to wind up and produce the power. Turn your torch on and it shines out straight away. It's the same with the megapacks. As soon as the demand is there, wow, these are producing electricity. So not only are they much more efficient, they're also an awful lot cheaper. It is cheaper to supply electricity from batteries that were stored during the day from excess PV power than it is to produce electricity from PV power, which in itself is massively cheaper to produce electricity than coal-fired power stations. There were many who predicted that the coal-fired power stations in Australia would keep on going for years. They are a coal state and they make most of their money from coal, and the previous Prime Minister was a great fan of coal. Not saying it's anything to do with finances, but he was very much in favour of coal. Well, change of government and a total change in technology has resulted in a dramatic change in the situation over there. Gone are most of the coal-fired power stations and been replaced by grid-connected battery systems. And these are massive things, absolutely huge. So, while I hold out no hope that the oil industry will have a guilty conscience and decide they've done enough damage to the planet with all their pollution over the years, directly from ripping the oil out of the ground to refining it and polluting the atmosphere to pumping it into cars which carry on the destruction of the atmosphere. Today they are being priced out of the market. EVs, like it or not, are cheaper to run. Now, they may be dearer to buy, don't doubt that, but they're very much cheaper to run if you can produce your own electricity at home. Now, the number of installations of PV panels going in the UK is at a record high. Yeah, even in our climate, pouring down with rain outside, but PV still works. Much smaller amounts of electricity produced, but they work every day during daylight. But the net effect is quite dramatic. Throughout the summer, yeah, you can run your house almost totally off PV. And what's happening at the moment is those who can't actually put PV panels on the roof, either because the roof doesn't face in the right direction or because there's no space, it's a strange shaped roof, we're seeing the rise now of what they call the balcony PV systems. Well, these are very much smaller systems. These are about a metre square. They're really quite small, about the size of a big painting. And you can stand them up in your garden. You can hang them on the south-facing wall. You can put them on your balcony. And they feed into the house. They're not grid connected, but they feed into batteries in the house. And you can supply a large part of the house power from these. And as Tesco say, every little helps. Now, it helps in two ways. First of all, for the owners, it reduces their electricity bills. Makes them independent, but reduces bills. For the environment, they no longer have to buy in electricity that was produced by coal or gas or any other type of fossil fuel. So there's a double benefit. And we're very much heading towards a situation where houses, when they're built new, do now have to have some form of their own generated renewable energy. You'll notice on new developments, they already have solar thermal panels on the roof. These produce the hot water for the house. And new regulations mean that they will now soon have to have solar PV panels on the roof. So they will not only generate their own hot water, but they'll also generate some of their own electricity. We're also seeing heat pumps now being specified in houses. There is a change on the way. It's not driven for altruistic reasons. It's not driven for environmental reasons. It's not driven for the good of mankind or humanity. But it is driven by finances. Well, thanks very much for watching. I'm Dave. If you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe and click the notification bell so that you'll be notified next time we launch a video in this series or on many other subjects.